Welcome to the Spirit of Mayflower podcast with me, Rachel Carter. Welcome to episode 5, where I land in Provincetown and explore the fantastic town and the national seashore. I'll be joined throughout by Ella and Wyn Pritchard of Highcliffe Music and my special guest, Ray Tobias, who welcomes guests to his home on Provincetown through Airbnb. Saturday the 10th of August, 4:30 p.m, in Provincetown at my lodgings on Bayberry Avenue. It's very quiet here, which is exactly what I like. Boston was so noisy. The ferry was smooth and straightforward, and Ray was waiting right on the dock with his car. There are so many holidaymakers on the street. It's just like the scene in Jaws. The ferry pulls up at the dock. The doors open and a stream of people flood out to explore Martha's Vineyard. The houses are very quaint painted wood. In the town centre, very small and getting larger as you leave the main street. I've just seen a hummingbird. Wow, they are so tiny. There is a bird feeder outside filled with liquid. I was wondering what it was, thinking it was perhaps a butterfly feeder. The house sits at the top of a hill surrounded by woodland and an open area at the back that overlooks a swampy nature reserve. My room is very nice. I have a room key, but not a house key, as they don't ever lock the front door. Another hummingbird, so cute and tiny. Weather is suddenly changing. Some black clouds are rolling in on a cold wind, just as I want to walk to town for some food. I'm reading William Bradford's diary and found a wonderful description of Provincetown. He said,
"The same day, so soon as we could, we set ashore 15 or 16 men, well armed, with some to fetch wood, for we had none left, as also to see what the land was, and what inhabitants they could meet with. They found it to be a small neck of land. On this side where we lay is the bay, and the further side the sea. The ground or earth, sand hills, much like the downs in Holland, but much better. The crust of the earth a spit's depth, excellent black earth, all wooded with oaks, pines, sassafras, juniper, birch, holly, vines, some ash, walnut, the wood for the most part open and without underwood, fit either to go or ride in. At night our people returned, but found not any person, nor habitation, and laded their boat with juniper, which smelled very sweet and strong, and of which we burnt the most part of the time we lay there."
The bad weather blew over in a matter of minutes, and Ray has offered a lift to the supermarket. But I'm suddenly very hungry, so asked if he could drop me at the closest restaurant. It's very posh. No vegan options on the menu, so I've ordered a salad and a bowl of sweet potato fries. It arrived. It was a massive bowl of lettuce with a small sprinkling of veg and a huge pile of fries. I managed most of the fries and picked out all the veg from the lettuce bowl. $24 for dinner. At this point, I should have gone back to Ray's, but fancied a walk. Reading Bradford's diary, and he commented that after landing in Provincetown over the next 4 months, that half of the people that arrived would be dead. But what astonished Bradford, that was half of them would somehow survive. He said,
"What could now sustain them but the Spirit of God and His grace? May not and ought not the children of these fathers rightly say, Our fathers were Englishmen, which came over this great ocean, and were ready to perish in this wilderness. But they cried unto the Lord, and He heard their voice, and looked on their adversity."
Headed to town. Found the shops didn't close at 5 p.m. but stay open into the evening. The streets were full and the bars and restaurants very crowded. I went in a few galleries. The third gallery I went in gave me an art book with a map of the local area. I headed to Tin Pan Alley, a local bar and restaurant, for a drink and to read my art book. There are over 40 galleries in this small 3-square-mile town, apparently the oldest art colony in America. I got chatting to a couple at the bar who were visiting for dinner, drinks and the theatre, who then promptly invited me to come along with them. I declined politely and said that I really must go shopping. Luckily, the gallery owner had marked the local supermarket, the Stop and Shop, on the map for me. It didn't look very far on the map, but it very quickly got dark, and the street lamps are not as close together as they are in the UK. I did my shopping. $22 got me fruits, salad, apple juice and plenty of dinner items, plus half a loaf and some honey for breakfast. Packed it in the brown paper bags, I love it, and headed out. It was so dark I had to put the torch on my phone. I headed in the direction of Ray's, listening to the crickets chirping and the creatures rustling in the undergrowth. Very soon there were no houses, so I held my phone up a little to help the odd passing car see me. I suddenly didn't recognise my surroundings, or could spot anything in the dark. I'm lost. I thought to myself, this is like one of those horror films where you see a happy backpacker walking down a dark, dusty road, crickets chirping, and then they get dragged off by a raging murderer. Up ahead, I could see a low-rider muscle car, the sort with the deep, rumbling engine. It had pulled into a lay-by under the only lamppost. I could just about make out a signpost just a little past the car and recognise it from my earlier tour with Ray as the end of the road. Left is the sea, straight on, the sea, right, a nature reserve. I had walked so far past Bayberry Avenue. What should I do? Walk around in the dark hoping to find the street? Or approach the car and ask for directions? I opted for the latter. The young man checked the maps on his phone. I was a long way from Bayberry. He said, "Get in and I'll take you." My head was full of alarm bells screaming, "Warning, warning, do not get in the car." But then what was the alternative? I thanked the driver for his kindness and climbed into the back of his car, and then noticed another man in the front passenger seat. That was it. I was in the back seat of a stranger's car, on a dark street, thousands of miles from home. What was I thinking? He popped on the sat-nav and followed the route up very dark lanes, trees everywhere so no moonlight penetrating the thick canopy. He said, "Let me know if you recognise anything," but I didn't. Everything looked different in the dark. I suddenly remembered that Ray and Vicky lived at a single-digit number. He typed in an update to the sat-nav, still so far away. Eventually, we stopped in a dead end, pitch black, but marked on the map. I said, "I think I can find it from here." He let me out of the car, said, "Have a lovely evening," and I thanked him again for his kindness, my heart pounding as I watched him drive away. I put my torch on and spotted the mailbox. Then the drive came into view, then the house. I went into the house clutching my paper bag of shopping to find Ray Skyping with Vicky. He said, "I was getting worried." Phew, what a stupid thing to do. Note to self. Tomorrow, do not go out after dark. Be home by sunset. It is too dark and woody to be wandering round on your own. Silly, silly woman. Everything I tell my daughters not to do, I have done all in one night. I think it's time for bed. Sunday, the 11th of August. I couldn't relax at all last night. I wonder why. Everyone is on a different time zone, and I thought, I wonder if Ivan would be online, as he was the only person I knew who was in the same time zone as me. He was. We had a quick chat, and he said my story was like a horror film, but was glad I was safe, and suggested I download a map app called Maps.me, which works without Wi-Fi. Done. This morning Ray had put out fruit and fresh coffee and pastries. I took some coffee and fruit and made toast with the bread I fetched from the shop last night. Told Ray about my dangerous adventure. He said the crime rate is very low in Provincetown. I His brother was the chief of police, and people are very honest and trustworthy. Luckily for me on this occasion, but still, home by sundown today, no exceptions. I met another couple who was also lodging here from New York. The guy was originally from Northern Ireland. They are a really nice couple and we chatted a little over breakfast. Ray offered another tour today of the east side of the village once he'd returned from taking his next door neighbour, his 90-year-old auntie, to the doctors. It's so peaceful here. I've spent the morning sketching and painting on the sun porch. I'm working on my Harvard drawings. Ray came back around 11:30 and asked if I'd still like a tour. He drove me all the way to the end of town and then back into town on the second road called Bradford Street. As we approached the centre of town, I suggested I got out and get lunch and wander for a while. I found a fresh food place with lots of salad options. You get a printed strip of paper and you circle the salad ingredients, the base and the dressing of your choice. I went for regular size, priced at $11. It was huge. I ended up on the beach, ate half the salad, then paddled in the clear, cold water of the bay. The town was packed, but not many on the beach. Very strange. I explored a few more galleries, ate the other half of my salad, and turned on the map app. It offered me a route through a residential area. As it was only 3 p.m. and bright sunshine, I thought, okay. The houses in Provincetown vary from tiny little shingled houses to huge properties up on the hill where I'm staying. I walked down a street which had big houses. The street narrowed to a sandy trackway, then turned the corner into a caravan park at the edge of the nature reserve. There's some amazing camper vans. Out the other side of the park and up the hill, now the houses are massive. Then at the top, found home. This app is great. I've spent the rest of the day painting and cooking. I've made lunches for the next 2 days, filmed a hummingbird, and packed my bag ready for the first day at the museum tomorrow as artist in residence. I'm excited to see how they've displayed my work that I posted ahead of time, and if all or any of the many visitors to the Provincetown Monument and Museum check out the project. Hopefully they will do. Monday the 12th of August. My first day complete. It was really steady all day. Had lots of takers for the weaving table, attracted by the many rolls of brightly coloured macrame cords. Out of the 100 keyring clasps that I had, I used over 40 on the first day. The museum are going to order some more. People are very interested in the process I'm using in my project, trying to digitally map macrame woven panels and then turning them into a 3D print and then casting them in bronze. They ask, where in America will the sculpture sit? And look disappointed to hear that it will be back in the UK. Last night, I heard howling. Ray said, it's only coyotes. They're bigger than a fox, but not as big as a German shepherd. And not to worry, they're more scared of you. I'm pleased I got home before dark tonight, that's all I will say. Apparently there are wild turkeys running around too. The Pilgrim settlers also refer to the noises in the night. They reported,
On Friday, January 12, John Goodman and Peter Brown were cutting thatch about 1.5 miles from the settlement. They had with them the 2 dogs, a small spaniel and a huge mastiff bitch. That afternoon, Goodman and Brown paused from their labours for a midday snack, then took the 2 dogs for a short ramble in the woods. Near the banks of a pond they saw a large deer, and dogs, no doubt led by the mastiff, took off in pursuit. By the time Goodman and Brown had caught up with the dogs, they were all thoroughly lost. It began to rain, and by nightfall it was snowing. They had hoped to find an Indian wigwam for shelter, but were forced to make the earth their bed and the elements their covering. Then they heard what they took to be 2 lions roaring exceedingly for a long time together. Goodman and Brown were now thoroughly terrified. They decided that if a lion should come after them, they would scramble into the limbs of a tree and leave the mastiff to do her best to defend them.
Tuesday the 13th of August. Woke early to chat with my husband. All's well at home. Sounds like it's finally stopped raining. I decided enough walking. Today I shall hire a cycle. I got a really good deal. It was just over $90 for a week's hire with a shopper-style bike complete with a basket, chain and lock and a helmet. I loaded up the basket and was at the museum in no time at all. The weather is very sticky and humid. I think a storm is on its way. The museum was packed today. I wove with around 80 people and I have totally run out of keyring clasps. I had to improvise with a loop of string instead. At one point I had around 8 or 9 teenagers ranging from 14 to 16 years of age. They were on a camp and all had a go at the weaving. I told them they could take more cord with them and they excitedly began choosing colours, telling me how boring it was at camp, especially without their mobile phones. The museum said go home early tonight as they need to set up for tonight's charity event, a night at the opera with the New York singers with champagne and oysters. Then they said, what are you doing tonight? And would I like a complimentary ticket? Yes, please, I responded. Can I bring a guest? They said, of course. So tonight, Ray and I are off to the opera. The operatics was amazing. Just a piano with a soprano and a tenor. The male and female singer sang a range of love songs from works such as West Side Story and Sweeney Todd. Wednesday the 14th of August. It was lovely riding to work today, so much quicker than walking, and I'm just about figuring out how to ride on the wrong side of the road. I'm going to be on the radio today around the Bay Area. I did a phone interview yesterday and they explained that they will edit it and use it in the news bulletins today. I had a meeting also with David, the director at the museum, and Diana, and shared with them my plans for the sculpture. They loved it. They said they would love one too if possible. First idea, a small version of the Pilgrim woman sculpture. Idea 2, a full-size Pilgrim woman featuring the weavings of local people from Provincetown, and maybe create the sculpture to celebrate Thanksgiving in 2021, which will be Thanksgiving's 400th anniversary. This is very exciting. The museum wasn't as busy as yesterday, but still kept me busy weaving with people until about 5:30. I pedalled to the Stop and Shop for some groceries, then home to cook dinner and make packed lunch for tomorrow. I'm so tired. Friday the 16th of August. Another busy day at the museum. I counted up this morning and I'd made 243 woven macrame keyrings with the visitors. I decided to change the residency days too. I'll work tomorrow, which is Saturday, and then have Sunday and Monday off. This should work better as I finish on a Saturday, pack Sunday, and then I'll leave and go home on a Monday. The museum told me that next week is Carnival Week and Tuesday will be a procession of floats, and would I like to take part? Yes, please. The theme is enchanted woodland, so I'm thinking maybe a bird with a macrame headdress, maybe some wings. They recommended a shop, but now I can't remember which one they said. Ray and Vicky think it may be the Army Surplus store, so I'll try and find it. Saturday 17th of August. A slow day today compared to the rest of the week. Met a family from Lincolnshire today. I think they said they live in Spalding. Everyone comments on my accent, which sounds overly posh when I hear myself speaking. They all say how nice it is. I'm not sure about making macrame for the costume, as I'm running low on bright colours now. I've had a few thoughts, but still not sure what I'm going to make. Thought I'd finish early at 4 p.m. today and then head into town. But the bike had other ideas. The chain fell off. I managed to fix it in the museum car park, but I got covered in oil. I wheeled my bike and my belongings to the car park attendant, who kindly looked after my things, whilst another took me to the washing up area. I headed to town and made my way through the crowds to the surplus store. Lots of good things, but this costume could cost me a fortune, so I've decided not to buy anything. Next to the Stop and Shop, I saw that the church next door has a thrift sale on a Monday between 10 and 4. Maybe I'll find something more usable at the church. I pedalled back home and saw a pair of wild turkeys crossing the road. No jokes here. I got back to Ray and Vicky's and sat down to dinner, and then saw the turkeys again, this time wandering round the back garden. Some gardens are very like English gardens here, but many don't have hedges, walls or fences marking out their boundaries. Instead, the landscape and the trees flow from one plot to another. When you look outside at the back garden, then the surrounding trees, then into the distance where there's a nature reserve, it feels like one big garden, and as such the wildlife roam from garden to garden. So far I have spotted turkeys, red squirrels, a large frog, a snake, heard coyotes, a woodpecker, Canada geese and hummingbirds, all in the back garden. Sunday the 18th of August. It's my day off today. I woke at 8 a.m. and Ray suggested a bike ride along the national seashore. He's offered to come with me and point out all the places of interest. We rode to Herring Cove Beach, then to Race Point Beach, where there were lots of people arriving for a day at the beach. There were signs everywhere warning people of the dangers of swimming in the sea, as it's peak shark season. I met a couple, and their son has apparently just graduated from Nottingham University. Such a small world. Back to the bike and off to the Provincetown Visitor Centre. You could head to the second floor lookout area and use the binoculars. There's lots of whale watching boats out at sea, not too far from the shore. Apparently they use sonar to locate the whales and then move towards their vicinity. The last part of the route took us through beech forest and into Provincetown town centre, which was packed. After continuing along Commercial Street, the crowds cleared and Ray showed me a lovely little beach with just a handful of locals on the sands. The water looked so inviting, so I dipped my feet for a few minutes before we headed out again for Ray's house. A 12-mile round trip through beautiful nature reserves, past many tidal flats, coastal areas and forests. Had a spot of lunch and saw some chipmunks this time, chasing each other around the garden. Oh, they are so cute. Ray's offered to drive me in the afternoon to Truro, Wellthreet, through East Ham, Orleans and finally to Brewster to give me a fuller flavour of Cape Cod. There are some amazing houses here and Ray is a great guide. Brewster was a very nice town. There was a general store in the middle of town which was so old the floor was all wonky and they had an old pot-belly stove in the centre of the shop. Tomorrow Ray has very kindly offered to take me sailing on his boat for a couple of hours in the morning. Sounds really good. I can sail, then shop and then hopefully make a costume. I'm reading Nathaniel Philbrick's book on the Mayflower, and he describes the description of the first house that the Pilgrims made. He writes, "On Christmas Day, 1620, they erected the frame of their first house. It took them 2 more weeks to complete the first building, a 20-foot square common house. It didn't have a proper foundation there just wasn't the manpower all the time for such luxury. Known as an earth-fast house, the Pilgrims' first structure probably possessed walls of hewn tree trunks, interwoven with branches and twigs that were cemented together with clay. This wattle and daub construction was typical of farmers' cottages in rural England, as was the building's thatched roof, which was made of cattails and reeds from the nearby marshes. The house's tiny, barely translucent windows were made of linseed-coated parchment. Now we are going back to 1620 to hear another of Pilgrim Mary Brewster's letters, written and performed by Ella Pritchard of Highcliffe Music. It is halfway through the voyage, and things have taken a dramatic turn.
The Mayflower, 6th of October 1620, 33 days at sea. My dearest Patience, I shall be so glad when we reach our journey's end. I would never do a sea voyage for pleasure. We have endured many high seas and spent many days at Hull, as the sailors say. They turn the ship broadside to the sea to ride out the storm, with no sails and the helm held to leeward. The wretched boat rolls and rolls, and we make not 1 yard of progress. We were in such a state last night, with the highest seas yet, when suddenly the ship's main beam buckled under the pressure and cracked. Oh, what a terrible noise! I surely do not know whether we will ever complete our journey. There is much urgent discussion amongst the men. Your father and William Bradford implore Captain Jones to continue our journey, but the crew are mutinous and want to turn back. The Mayflower is leaking. Efforts to staunch the flow are feeble, and we all fear for our lives. It is more important than ever to trust in the Lord and believe that He needs us delivered safely to the new world. Disease is taking hold among us. Both passengers and crew suffer greatly. Our physician, Samuel Fuller, is kept very busy. He is of recent learning and little practical experience, although his father was a butcher by trade. I fear it will be mostly left to us few women to tend the sick and the dying. Dorothy Bradford is once again low in spirit after the troubles of the storm. Elizabeth Hopkins is willing, but somewhat slowed by her condition. I will stay strong and do what I can, whilst teaching Priscilla Mullins how to assist me. I know God has all of us in His hand, but the challenge of doing His will for these long weeks is sometimes more than I think I can bear. That gnawing, relentless feeling of anxiety inside combines with the maritime queasiness that never leaves me. People think that because we have faith, we do not have fears, but this situation is so grave. Oh, Patience, the perils of this journey and the challenges facing us, should we be spared, have tested me greatly. I feel that the carefree girl I once was has gone forever. Then your father leads us all in prayer, and my faith is restored. My weary body feels lighter, and I am filled with a new and resolute spirit. Do you recall that cocky young sailor I told you about? The one who was giving the eye to Priscilla Mullins and tormenting those of us with seasickness, saying that he wished us all dead? Well, he caught the sea fever, and was the first on the Mayflower to die. His body was cast into the ocean with little but a token prayer. Many of our company thought it had just ended for him, but he was young, and I could not bear to see the fear in his eyes as the fever overwhelmed him. I tended him during his last hours as best I could, and sang to him a quiet song in the hope that he would, at his final breath, turn to the Lord. Well, Patience, this letter once again is somewhat turning to misery, so I will stop now. I will, of course, write again to update you on our precarious situation. I will not be able to send any mail until some time after our arrival, should we be blessed to complete our journey. There is little on the horizon out here. We just passed a boat headed for England, the first that we have seen. I could not make out the name of it, as it was far too distant. There may not be another for some time. You will surely receive a whole batch of these letters at once, so, after I seal them, I will number them on the outside, so that you can follow them in order should they ever reach you. Keep safe and well until we meet again. With very much love to all. Mother. P.S. Trust in the Lord.
I'd like to welcome my next special guest. It's Ray Tobias, all the way from North Carolina. How are you, Ray?
I'm fine. Dealing with COVID-19 as the rest of the world is, but we're fine. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. So, Could you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your fantastic place in Provincetown?
I was born and raised in Boston, but summered on Cape Cod through most of my life. My parents retired to Cape Cod, so it's a love relationship for me. I've always wanted to be able to spend time there in my retirement, and after my parents passed, of course, I was able to purchase my brother's half of the house, and I'm now living my dream. I winter in North Carolina for the milder weather, but spend the summers on Cape Cod, kind of reliving my childhood.
Oh, it's such an idyllic place, and it's just so breathtaking. All the nature there, and the ocean, and then the Cape Bay. It's very different, even though Provincetown is a very thin spit of land. I know that while I was there, you very kindly took me on lots of different tours. So would you just explain a little about the National Seashore? Because the spit of land that is Cape Cod comes right out into the ocean, doesn't it? And separates it into this huge bay on one side of the land and then the Atlantic Ocean on the other.
Could I give you a bit of history then, geologic history to start?
Of course.
It was formed, Cape Cod was formed somewhere around 15,000 years ago, when the glaciers, I think it was in the Wisconsin period, started to recede. And there was a big ice sheet, a Laurentine ice sheet, and as it started to recede, it deposited all of this glacial moraine. So Cape Cod really the term is terminal glacial moraine. And as the ice sheet started to recede, the runoff deposited Cape Cod and kind of separated that hook of land, separates the Atlantic Ocean and then Cape Cod Bay, if you will, to the west. So as it receded and the ice sheet melted, it also left a number of ponds that are called kettle ponds. And a kettle pond, different from other ponds, is it doesn't have any water feeding in or out of it. It's just basically fed by rainfall, and it's a hole. And those kettle ponds perforate all of Cape Cod, and they offer a lot of freshwater activities, fishing and boating and stuff, as well as the Atlantic Ocean on one side and Cape Cod Bay on the other. Because it was such a precious area, Massachusetts wanted to form a state park, if you will, on the outer part of Cape Cod, and approached all the towns, not just Provincetown, but Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham, and Orleans, about setting some land aside as a state park. One caveat was that the people who resided there could have the usual and customary use of the land.
Right.
And Massachusetts agreed to that. They said, of course, because there are a lot of people who either fished off the shore or collected beach plums to make beach plum jam, which was their livelihood, because there's a tourist dense area. One wonderful event, there's one of the Portuguese women who was in her then 80s, every fall would go out and gather beach plums and make beach plum jam to sell the following summer. Well, when it became a national seashore, they changed the rules about where you could drive. You had to stay on an organized road. You couldn't go off-road anymore because they were afraid it was eroding into the dunes.
Oh, I see.
And so Rose was collecting beach plums not on a qualified road. She was off in her four-wheel drive, and a ranger saw her and came over and said, "Ma'am, you're going to have to move your vehicle or else I'm going to have to arrest you." And she said, "But I have the usual and customary use. This is what I do every year." And he said, "I'm sorry, you'll have to do it from that road." She said, "Well, I can't carry my beach plums from here to there." She said, look at me, I'm 80 something years old. And he said, well, ma'am, are you refusing? And so he arrested her.
Oh dear.
Okay. So, it would have been a lot nicer if you'd have said, you know what, ma'am, let's move your car. And when you fill your baskets, I will help you bring them over to your car. That would have resolved the issue right there. But instead, what happened was she was arrested, and the headlines in the Cape Cod Standard Times, which is the largest newspaper, on the Cape, was Rose Santos arrested for picking beach plums.
Oh dear.
Which, of course, was not the issue. It was the issue for being off the road. Well, it caused a huge uproar.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of a cute story.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you tell that story, because I remember when you took me on a tour of some of the old towns, that we pulled up at a jam place, and I brought 3 little jars of jam and to take home, and one of them was this famous beach plum jam, and I wrapped them really carefully. I thought, I'm not going to put them in my suitcase. I'll put them on my carry-on because I don't want to break them, because it's a set jam. It's not a liquid. So I thought I was doing everything right. And then when I went through customs, the guard stopped me at Boston Airport, and he said, what have you got in your bag? I said, I haven't got any liquids in. He says, oh, yes, you have. And he made me unpack it. And he took out a jar of jam and he said, this. I says, but that's not a liquid. He went, no, it's still classed as a liquid. But I said, no, but it's jam. And he says, are you going to argue with me? And I was like, no. And he confiscated my jam. And I thought, oh no. I thought, at least I've still got 2 more. And then he said, you've got another one, haven't you? I was like, oh. And he went through the whole thing again and took that jar, and then looked at me the 3rd time and said, hand over the 3rd one. So I got all my jams confiscated, and I thought, I'm not going to argue anymore with him, because I'll end up getting arrested for arguing with the customs officials. So when I touched down in London, got off the plane, I messaged my dad and said, arrived safely back in the UK, but I'm afraid your gift has been confiscated by US Customs.
Oh, so sorry.
So, if I ever get to come to Provincetown again, I'm going to buy some beach plum jam again, but this time I'm going to eat it, because I've never had a chance to sample it yet. With some of the old towns that you took me through, and the stories that you sort of gave and narrated as we drove through all these towns, and there was one that I wrote about in my diary, which was the little mom and pop store. You described it in Brewster. That had got
yes,
funky floors and the potbelly stove. And did I remember rightly that you said that when you was a boy you used to have to go and fetch all your family's mail from that store?
I'm saying this is 1950. I'm thinking 54 to 56, in that range. I actually had gotten very interested in sailing. And there was an opportunity at one of the sailing schools there to purchase the old wooden boats at the end of the season. And I asked my father if I could get a sailboat. And he said, this is what you're going to do. Every day for the rest of the summer, you're going to go to Doan's. It was called Donald Doan's then. It was a general store, potbelly, with all of the furnishings and a little candy counter. But one corner was the general delivery mail. And he said, what you can do is you can go get the mail for your Aunt May, your grandmother, and your mom, and get your grandfather's newspaper. And each day that you do that, mark it on the calendar. At the end of the summer, you will have made enough money, because I'll pay you. I forget what he said it was. In fact, I don't think he said. I think he was hedging, because he didn't know how much the boat was going to cost.
Oh.
and he said at the end of the summer, you'll have enough money to buy a boat. There was a little path on the side of the road, and I would ride to Doan's, and my grandfather would give me a little bit of money to buy some candy at the store. And so I was getting it both ways. I was getting the boat, and I was getting paid by being able to buy some penny candy at the store.
Oh,
And I would carry the mail and the newspaper back each day, and I'd mark it on the calendar. The store itself has since been sold and is now called the Brewster store, and it has maintained that 50-year-old, 100-year-old look with the wide board floors and the stove in the middle of the store that they still use for heat, and it's a gathering place during the winter months for the locals.
right.
It's such a quaint place. The towns are small, and they're varied, but very much a maritime history. The national seashore, that whole area, that outer part of Cape Cod, is trying to preserve that natural plan, if you will.
Yeah.
Not so much the whales, obvious, because they're offshore, but that was the whole purpose of the national seashore, was to preserve that so that the wildlife would persist, the turkeys, the coyotes, the deer. And and so they're being successful, and that's one of the reasons why they're trying to preserve it. They're saying you can't go off the proven road, because it would cause an erosion factor that would cause the change in the wildlife, the plant life, and then the wildlife, as that whole scene deteriorated. So that the locals seem to understand that, but I think over the years they have recognized that what's happened is it's actually being preserved now rather than being eroded away.
Yeah. I'm so thankful that you took me out, on my days off from the museum, that you took me on all of these different adventures, both by road and by cycle and by water. It was amazing. I'd like to say thank you very much, Ray, for being my special guest on the podcast.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Spirit of Mayflower is part of a series celebrating my Spirit of Mayflower project. You can get involved in lots of ways. You can take a look at some of the movies and pictures I took on my journey by heading to the Rachel Carter Sculpture Facebook page. You can also head to my website at www.rachelcarter.co.uk, and there you'll be able to view some of the sculptures I make, treat yourself to a limited edition Pilgrim woman sculpture, or take a look at some of the online tutorials